Hello, I'm Toby Fox from the 1.5 million new homes campaign sponsored by Redloft, and I'm here today in Slough to understand how Slough Borough Council can contribute more to the government's ambition of getting 1.5 million new homes built. And I'm with Pat Hayes, Executive Director for Regeneration, Housing and Environment, to understand in this episode a little bit about what needs to change to get more homes built. So Pat, we're here virtually in the heart of Slough, looking at a site where homes clearly could be delivered but aren't being delivered. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about this site and its location and how you describe it.
It's actually one of the key sites for Slough. It's right in the middle of the town centre, 5-minute walk to the Crossrail Elizabeth line station. You can see Windsor Castle from here on a good day, clear day. But nothing's happened. This site's been like this for nearly 10 years. Yeah. Various planning applications have been put in, none of them in a position that we could even contemplate. And that's us being very, very permissive, bringing them forward because there's fundamentally wrong and fundamental basic things wrong in terms of relations to buildings behind, etc. Servicing and all those sort of things. Owned by, privately owned, not a property developer in specialist training, can't bring it forward. Not viable, no possible consented scheme, just sitting here blighting our town centre. Potential enormous value add with the sites opposite, which are going to market.
And what is the potential? I mean, how many homes could you imagine being delivered?
With good design, you could be on 400, 500 homes on this site potentially. Height is a challenge around viability, but not necessarily around design. It needs an imaginative solution, and as we saw earlier, probably needs a skilled developer with deep pockets and a lot of development experience. Yeah. I mean, the issue in Slough is obviously around viability. Yeah. You could go higher here, actually. You could be pushing up to between 12 and 20. I think viability will become more of an issue for you in design and build costs. But certainly, you've got significant building behind. You could, depending on where you put the height, and respecting that building behind, deliver a really significant development which will have a catalytic effect on the town centre as well. This is a town centre that needs more people living here to support the retail and the food and beverage offer. Like lots of town centres, its problem is not enough people live within walking distance. This would help to resolve that problem straight away. It's very sustainable because you've got buses outside, you've got train station just over the road effectively, so it could be a very low car development, doesn't need expensive parking provision, and could make a real contribution to the public realm in terms of that interface at ground floor level. And
what's the process? So is the developer coming to you with applications and you're turning those down because they just don't meet your requirements?
We're not even getting to that point of taking the committee. It's going, no, these don't work. You can't do that. And and this is one of the important things. Often people see planning authorities as blockers. We are incredibly permissive and have granted lots and lots of development. We've just been to a site where really enabled that to happen. But there's some things you just have to go, no, that is just a really poor scheme.
And what are your red lines in those
Well,
terms?
I mean, in this one, it's about scale and massing against existing building, i.e. the building behind.
So you're blocking out light
and build up to their windows, basically, and that's absolute basic. And then it's about, design quality, how it interacts with the streets, how it interacts with the other areas around it. And height isn't the problem. It's quality of design and it's nature of massing and making sure there's proper servicing, all those things that you don't want to create a new slum development in the middle of a town centre. You want to create something that actually works as a place to live, and that does require, it requires value in the scheme, and I think it requires some perception of the site. And I think here it's you've got a non-expert owner who's probably not listening to their advisors, who probably could produce a good scheme for them.
Pat, what needs to change to deliver homes on this site?
I think a more simplified compulsory purchase system, not necessarily to use it, so just know that developers know that there's always a clock ticking, and if they don't do something, then they could lose the whole site at existing use value rather than any speculative. And the government are addressing that to a degree, but that process is still, it's a long-winded process to take a CPO through. CPO through, CPZ is something totally different and equally interesting. But it's still a very long and costly process with lots of very high barriers for a local authority to address. There's always that thing, I can bring a scheme forward, it's just not viable, and then you get to hold it. So I think that needs work. This should be an area where, possibly some support from government in terms of how you broker that discussion in terms of there is a willing purchaser here, you need to sell them to them at this value.
Right.
You know, rather than people having ridiculous value expectations and then thinking they can ransom the local authority to let them do something substandard just because it's such a blight. And other, you know, the other rules around temporary use. We've had to stop this site being used for car parking, which obviously drives a quite good income stream and incentivises people not to bring sites forward. So again, you know, in terms of rules and regulations, is there more that can be done to stop undesirable meanwhile uses without stopping desirable meanwhile uses?
Yeah. And have you got experience of implementing CPOs before?
Yeah.
And what are the kind of hurdles and difficulties and challenges?
I mean, we had good success ultimately in Ealing with the cinema site there, but less success in Barking where we lost one because couldn't prove the scheme. The inspector took the view the alternative scheme wasn't viable.
Right.
You know, and that's quite a big challenge to prove that one, you've got a scheme, two, it's in the public interest to acquire the site for that scheme, and now this sort of other check, well, your scheme's not viable. You know, and you think, well, yes, but on the other hand, there's lots of things you can do subsequently once you acquired a site to make a scheme viable. So, you know, the barrier is set very high at the moment.
Okay.
And CPOs they're very long-winded, very specialist, and sometimes it just falls down on the whim of the inspector hearing the case. You know, you get some very strange decisions. It's the nature of personal decisions, but therefore there are people who, you know, will chance it on the basis that they might get lucky and win. You know.
And is it a question of changing legislation in order to make that happen? I mean, how do you?
Yeah, I think there is. I mean,
barriers?
I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but I think you do need the whole process needs to be looked at and simplified, and possibly, you know, particularly around government housing targets. You know, in the way that now data centres are regarded as strategic infrastructure and different rules apply for those, possibly for housing sites, long-term holds. You know, site, let's say, has been empty for 10 years, a different process applies, or that is forfeited in some way at existing use value, you know, without a process. Effectively, it's an automatic, a sort of reverse PD on a site like that. Yeah.
Pat, you've talked about CPOs as a thing that has to change for you to deliver homes in this site. What other things would you look for? What else needs to change so that you can maximise the contribution the council can make to the government's targets?
I think that the main thing is around grant for affordable housing, and the threshold for applying that grant. I mean, the game changer, to use a cliched expression, would be, if we were able to apply for additional grant, whether it's for greybelt sites, brownfield sites, existing consents, to bring those forward at speed, and say, well, there's money there at it's a sensible grant rate which can, relates to real build cost that we could then put into schemes, and give councils additional, potentially borrowing potential to buy sites as well. Our problem is that we've maxed out on our borrowing, but that you've got to put public sector money in to change the housing model in the UK. I mean, we over-reliant on house builders. House builders clearly want to restrict supply because it pushes up price. They're quite comfortable with a low absorption rate because, again, that holds prices high. We need to do something fundamentally which changes and resets that dial. And the only way to do it is to put a large amount of public money in to actually deliver, enable schemes to be brought forward faster and bring forward the affordable, always as the lead on some of these sites. You could do this in sites entirely. It's affordable with grant. You could buy it with grant. You could bring it forward with grant. You could bring it forward with a developer backed by a big chunk of grant, because you probably don't necessarily want an entirely mono-tenure particular price point scheme. But that would be the game changer. Much more grant just pushed into the and probably administered by local authorities, so that Homes England or whoever give local authorities the chunk of money and say, here is your affordable housing grant allocation against what you think is in your development pipeline, to then use and apply on sites, rather than always having to go through this tortuous bidding process for each individual scheme, almost, and each individual unit, almost.
So is there a trust issue there, do you think, in terms of providing all that money, giving all that money over to councils and enabling councils to spend it as they see fit to deliver new homes?
I think it's a massive trust and confidence issue, and there's an issue around the relationship between the civil service, not necessarily government at political level, the civil service and its agencies, and process around money and accounting, and the constant dead hand of the Treasury on everything in the UK in terms of fiscal control, and not wanting to put any, let the fiscal brakes off, not trusting local authorities to be able to do things, not trusting local authorities interfacing in the development world, and always wanting a very, very complex administrative process, which are clearly keeps the wheels of the civil service going, because the more complex the process, the more civil servants you need, and the more you feel you have control, even if you don't have real control.
A less cynical perspective on that might be that, as a taxpaying member of the public, I'm very grateful that the Treasury is prudent and wants to make sure that spending is controlled and efficient and so on. So isn't that quite a strong argument for being cautious?
But if you look at the way it operates in other countries, they may have slightly higher tax rates, but they have much more fiscally dynamic approaches to housing delivery, whether that's Denmark, Netherlands, whatever. And seeing, housing tenures of all types as being of equal validity, and government's role to be there, to be involved in delivering in the housing market, are very much, it's not government's role, or it's only government's role tangentially, or we'll do it through the RP sector rather than directly or through the local authorities, is different, there's being prudent and being careful with resource, and there's actually stopping things happening and not wanting to see things happen. And we have got to take a step out of, government shouldn't be intervening too much in the housing market, and the government has got to intervene if you're going to get your 1.5 million homes built. You have actually got to put some public money down there, and the result back to the taxpayer and multiplier is massive. We as a borough, we're spending £28 million a year on keeping people in temporary accommodation. Long term, value for money for the taxpayer. You'd much rather see those people in good quality flats paying rent, probably therefore able to get jobs. The children aren't costing the health service so much money, etc., etc. And we don't look at those bigger pictures. Everything's in its own box.
Well, especially if we're paying rents on houses that have been sold on right to buy that we paid for in the first place to build.
Absolutely. I mean, a big chunk of our sold stock is then it's no longer owner occupied. It's occupied by a landlord, or bought by a landlord, who quite possibly rents it back to us or another council at a premium to put someone in temporary accommodation on. Not a good way to run a railway.
Part of the problem on the viability of this site is around governance and health and safety measures that have been introduced to make sure there are more enough fire escapes in case of emergency and so on. Is that an argument that legislation is too strong and it's blocking the development of new homes?
I think it's more complex on this site. I mean, height probably isn't a problem. We would allow height here. It's how height is designed and placed on a site, and there is scope to place height in this site. There are viability issues around height. Some of it relates to the sheer construction cost of going higher. There are new rules around fire safety. I mean, it's a very difficult one, because always, when you see any sort of disaster, the reaction, the dial always goes too far the other way, and we probably have gone too far. This has happened in all sorts of things, and that will probably need to come back over time in terms of things that you now can't do, like external balconies and things like that. Probably have gone too far. Other things, we probably, it is probably right, and that we ought to be factoring in, and in other countries, some of these fire safety principles are factored in, others they're not, but, we need to find a middle ground possibly. And again, that's another reason why you need an appropriate grant regime to support construction. If you're going to say, well, as the government, we expect this to be the base standard, we want high dense buildings in town centres, do you need a different grant regime to support that? Do you need something which is specifically around funding fire safety measures or design measures led by fire safety? I think it's all things you can consider. And again, can a pure market-based system deliver it? And again, that's the question. Can you deliver it within the market without state help? And is that state help, value for money, etc., etc.? And I would argue probably, to get development moving, you may need to look at whether the state needs to intervene more.
So the challenges on this site that you're seeing here, how common are these sorts of challenges in your experience in all over London, in Barking and Dagenham and Ealing?
I mean, this is a classic example of a very common problem of a site which has fallen into someone's hands effectively through another previous use or acquisition, just spec acquisition, and somebody has got an aspiration to develop it and make a lot of money, but hasn't actually got enough money behind them to bring that aspiration forward. And there are lots of sites in Slough with planning permission, which the guy or person who's got it can't bring it forward. This is a site they haven't even got planning permission because they can't even get to that stage. Ambitious views on end value.
Yeah.
Probably in some cases, and we have it in Slough to a degree, that people overpaid for sites on the basis of pricing in Crossrail once, twice and sometimes 3 times.
Because
so,
you got the Elizabeth line opened up.
Yeah, and people priced
recently.
it in once and then it was priced in twice, because partly because it was delayed and things like that. So you probably had, over ambitious sellers, people rushing to buy things, paid too much, now can't bring a viable scheme. And everywhere throughout my career, it's always been one of those problems, has been the landowner developer who paid too much.
Yeah.
And how do you deal with that? They won't take a haircut. We have it in spades over the other side there, where the 2 shopping centres, I think the current owner acquired for £120 million, probably worth 25, 30, 35 on a good day, at the moment.
That's a crew cut.
That really is, and there are people who can afford it because it's a massive overseas fund, but it's a real issue in lots of places, and other places, where there have been changes of rules and developers now can't bring schemes forward because they're always right on the edge of viability. Again, another problem which we could address through the system is people don't price in to land value cost of affordable housing. Question there, should you have a use class for affordable housing sites? Many would say no. Others of us might say certainly worth looking at, because that would then depress that price. And enable viable development to come forward on those sites which are earmarked for affordable housing, rather than people thinking, I'll pay X million for that site because I'll always get away with not having to do any affordable housing, and it just pushes the values up all the time.
And over time, if I wait long enough, those values eventually
and this is the other problem in the UK, that both individual homes and sites, we have sites which are just used to park money. If you're from a country which is volatile politically, or where new rules might be brought in, whether it's Hong Kong or someone like that, there is a real incentive to buy sites in the UK. That's a way to park your money. It won't go down in value, it might not go up that fast, but you won't lose your money, certainly, and you'll never actually make a genuine loss, because you'll probably always keep up with inflation. But you've got no interest in seeing it develop, because it's there as an asset to ultimately sold as a development site. You even see it with individual flats. People buy individual flats in blocks, don't let them because they want to be able to sell them pristine first hand, effectively. So there are all these things in that, with property being seen as an investment asset rather than somewhere for people to live, and that bedevils the whole British system.
So Pat, clearly there is a lot of potential in Slough to build new homes. How much potential is there? What can Slough potentially contribute to the 1.5 million
I think,
target?
in terms of existing consents and sites that you could realistically see coming forward in the town centre, we could be talking 10,000 homes.
10,000 homes?
10,000 homes, with another 5,000 potentially in sympathetic development in the area around Heathrow, the sort of degraded greenbelt, things like that. So,
over what sort of time period? 20 years? 10 years?
I think we could see, we've got consents for over 3,000 in the pipeline just in the town centre. So there's probably another 4,000 easily. I think over the next 5 years you could see delivery of 5 to 10,000 homes in Slough, potentially, with the right economy and the right vehicles behind it. Over 15 years, definitely that 15,000, and you could grow that. That's, I think that's a relatively modest assessment, but it just goes to show the scale of potential opportunity in a very, very well connected part of the southeast, and that's without requiring any infrastructure investment as well, which is, you could develop around the Heathrow area, and people already walk to Terminal 5 to get the tube, against the flow, of course, so that's priority, good use of the existing infrastructure. Obviously here we've got both road and rail infrastructure coming out of our ears, literally, so make use of that.
And all of these homes could be built within the walking distance of a station that is 35 minutes to Bond Street in central London.
15 minutes to Paddington, on the fast train. So it's really, it could be a real model of, easily accessible, southeast, near to employment as well. You're walking distance from the Slough Trading Estate, so you don't necessarily have to get the train to work. So you have a 15-minute bus ride to Heathrow, which employs, tens of thousands of people. So you are putting people where there are jobs and where there is a population of working age, and actually, a young vibrant population that is, exactly what employers are looking out for if you get the skills side right as well.
And this is all adjacent to London, so this is like the solution for London's housing
we
crisis.
We could be a big part, both solving our own challenge, but also helping solve London's housing challenge and move that price boundary of London. Yeah, you don't have to be in West London, which is very, very expensive for all sorts of reasons. You could be just slightly further west, and you could do brand new homes, access the same job market within the same travel to work zone at slightly lower cost.
On that scale, it feels like something that the New Towns Initiative might be investigating, so Michael Lyons.
I think it's certainly something that, if we can come up with an idea to be part of that programme and deliver. It's not a new town because obviously there's an existing town, but additions to an existing town as part of that new town. A town centre development, bringing people into the town centre to revitalise our town centre. But huge opportunity around Heathrow, really degraded employment, grey belt, green belt. Huge opportunity to deliver a new community focused around Heathrow employment opportunities, Poyle employment opportunities, Central London employment opportunities, and in a way that actually enables you, as the Dutch have done in the area around Schiphol, to bring to life that area which is wetland, waterways, but at the moment it's just used for storing containers, the odd mangy horse, etc., etc. You could do something there which created a really fabulous green environment, but with homes and with jobs.
No doubt there are countless more things that Pat Hayes would like to change in order to deliver more homes for Slough, but that's all we've got time for in this episode. In our next episode, we're going to be talking with Pat about what it takes to build and sustain a career in public sector housing delivery. And if you'd like to make sure you don't miss that, do hit subscribe now. Also, hit like if you think we're doing a half-decent job. It'd be much appreciated. In the meantime, many thanks for watching 1.5 million New Homes, sponsored by Redloft.